Hey Nicole, how you doing?
Hey, great. How are you? Can you hear me?
Absolutely, absolutely. That
Okay.
was pretty smooth getting on. Most people
Yeah.
take like a minute or two. It's nice to
Oh,
see someone who knows how to use IG Live.
well, I'll
So,
take it. Doesn't
well,
always
listen,
go that way.
yeah, seriously. But listen, thanks for joining us today. As everyone logs on, I'm just going to do a brief introduction about all your amazing accomplishments, if that's okay.
That's fine with me. Yeah, thanks.
All right, perfect. So today we are very lucky to have Nicole Stott. She's a former NASA astronaut as well as Space Shuttle and International Space Station veteran. She's been on multiple space flights with 104 days of living and working in space. Highlights of her missions include 3 Space Shuttle flights and 2 Space Station expeditions, 1 spacewalk, notably only the 10th woman to ever do so. She's flown the robotic arm for the first track and capture of the free-flying Japanese HTV cargo vehicle, installation and first run on the COLBERT treadmill, and space station maintenance. Notably, she was the last space station crew member to return to the Earth on a space shuttle. Nicole's 28-year NASA career started at the Kennedy Space Center, where she worked as an engineer and manager for the Space Shuttle and Space Station programs. Prior to being selected as an astronaut, Nicole worked for 2 years at the Johnson Space Center as a flight simulation engineer in the NASA Aircraft Operations Division. Nicole was selected as an astronaut in the year 2000 as one of the 17 members of the 18th group of NASA astronauts. As background, she earned her BS in Aeronautical Engineering from Embry-Riddle and a Master's of Science in Engineering from the University of Central Florida. Notably, she's also the founder of the Space for Art Foundation, uniting a planetary community of children through the inspiration of space exploration and the healing power of art. And we'll get into that later. But we're going to get into something that I find absolutely fascinating. I'm just going to give a disclaimer that I grew up always wanting to be an astronaut, so I'm very jealous. I had to settle and be a brain surgeon, but what you do is absolutely amazing. And I just looking forward to our discussion today about what it's like to go to space.
Yeah, me too. And I wouldn't downplay that whole brain surgeon thing. That's pretty impressive.
Well, we can switch jobs if you want for a day. We'll do
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I think it would go easier for you.
Well, listen, Nicole, I just wanted to get into a little background. Tell us about the training that's required to become an astronaut.
Well, I think there's, even before you're selected, I think you're already probably doing things that, like that kind of puts you in a position to, consider it or to be selected. You're staying in shape for sure. I mean, that's going to be required of you in one way or another. But once you are selected, it's a lot like going back to school, quite honestly. You're learning, for several years, and, throughout, you're learning all about the spacecraft you're going to fly on, everything from the systems that, make up those spacecraft themselves and how you operate them, to the kind of science you're going to do while you're on board, the maintenance of them, the way you work and live as crew members on board those spacecraft. And then, of course, there's cool stuff like learning how to do a spacewalk, where you get in the big white suit and you go into a swimming pool and you are in there for 6 hours doing what I would say was the most physically challenging training that we do. And, learning how to fly the robotic arm, that big white crane that's on the station or the shuttle. And, sadly, we can't go to space to learn to fly in space. So we do, most of this in simulators a lot. I joke with my son that he'd be able to go and do this like right off the bat, because a lot of it's like big video games and things. And then we do a lot of exploration training, where we go and we live underwater for 18 days, or we go out to Utah Canyon lands and, traipsing around as a crew, figuring out, your own strengths and weaknesses and how you leverage that across all of you for a successful mission. But yeah, all fun stuff. And learning how to speak Russian. That was probably the most difficult thing.
So, moving into what the actual first flight is like, because obviously, very few people on this planet experience that. But the night before your first time going to space, talk about how nervous you are. What's the feeling the night before? Has reality really sunk in? You've trained your career all for this moment, and now it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think the reality actually sinks in until you're strapped in and you're at that like 10, 9, 8 phase of the countdown. there's nothing I think that prepares you to be ready to believe it's actually going to happen until that point where, where you think, okay, holy moly, we might actually lift off the pad.
Yeah.
I think all the way up to that, it's like an anxiousness. It's not a nervousness, really. It's not necessarily a fear. It's more like, wow, like you just said, I've been training so long to do this. What's it going to feel like? Am I going to do a good job? I want to do a good job. I want it to be exciting, but I also know that this is meaningful work to do. I mean, you're all in kind of that mode of, being prepared to do the work you're about to do as part of the launch, then after, but also just like ready to feel what it's going to feel like. Yeah.
And so what's that morning like? Is it business as usual, regular breakfast? How early do you get there, preparation wise?
Yeah, and we always call it morning. It's funny, regardless of what time the day the launch actually happens to be. I think on my first flight, we ended up launching at, I don't know, it was like minute before midnight. And it was originally scheduled to go at like 4 o'clock in the morning. But we always tend to call that meal we have before going out to the launch pad breakfast. Most people eat what they would normally eat, I think. But it's business as usual in the sense that it's the business that you do to get ready to go out, to strap into a rocket. And so there's some traditions along the way. There's the whole suit up process that takes, an hour or so. And then we end up being out at the launch pad a couple hours before launch and getting strapped in and comfortable. And I think that, you're just, again, you're ready to go. It's quiet. The crew doesn't really get involved in the launch countdown until about 20 minutes before. So you get situated, you kind of chill out. I mean, I remember napping, for a little while just to, that moment of Zen kind of thing before, before going. Yeah.
I mean, kind of crazy. Are you thinking about the risks at all? Or are you just like, I'm ready to go?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever ignorant of those risks. That would be naive to think, when you strap onto 7 million pounds of what's going to be exploding, rocket fuel kinds of stuff to get you out of gravity. But I don't think that's what you're focused on. I think you're focused on being ready to do the job. If there's any, for me at least, I can't speak for others, but for me, my fear, if there was anything, was not about me in the rocket ship, not about me doing, what I was about to do, but about my family watching me. It is a lot more difficult to be, to watch somebody that you love strap into a rocket to go to space than it is to be the person doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've worked all your life, you're sitting in this cockpit, strapped in. How laser focused are you at that point? Is it just you're running checklists through your head over and over? Or are you just like, let's get this party started?
I think there's a combo maybe of that going on. You're certainly kind of going through that cadence of, I'd like to think the same thing is probably happening with you as you go into a surgery, right? You've done this before. In some cases, maybe you haven't, and you're like, okay, here's the things I very deliberately need to be doing. We have a checklist for it all. And yet you want to know, be prepared to get to those steps and do them like you've done in the simulator so many times before. And I think you're thinking about, okay, make sure that you keep this focus while all of this other stuff is going on that doesn't happen in the simulator.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of rumbling, that kicking off the launch pad, that energy that you're going to feel while this is all happening, kind of getting that focus to stay in it while all of that is going on that you haven't, you haven't been with before.
And so they start the countdown, it hits 1. What is that? Just kind of try to describe. I know it's probably impossible to accurately describe, but what is it like to be on a rocket going to space for that initial thrust? I mean, what is it like?
I think nothing prepares you for it. I worked at the Kennedy Space Center for 10 years, helping prepare space shuttles to go, watching them launch, thinking in my head, after talking to people that had done that, I know how this is going to feel. And I don't think anything prepares you for it. It is just like this unleashing of energy that is almost overwhelming. I mean, for the shuttle, the countdown, you get into that 10, 9, 8 sequence, and for the space shuttle at 6 seconds is when all the liquid fuel that was in the big orange tank would start to flow to those little engines on the back of the space shuttle. And I always thought that would be really, really dynamic. And yet it was just kind of this rumble. You could kind of feel a little bit of vibration and hear it, you know, in your headset. But it wasn't that crazy. But then at 0, when those 2 solid rocket boosters lit, that was like, holy moly. I mean, I remember thinking, wow, was I ever on a launch pad? You're like kicked from behind, and all of a sudden start feel like 3 of you are starting to sit on, you know, on your chest, and you're shaking like I never imagined a body could shake, you know. And I've watched the cockpit video, and I'm like, that does not show how I felt. Like I was like jello inside, just this vibration. And that would go on for like the 2 minutes until the boosters separated with this big bang and flash. And then you still felt the load, but it was smooth. And then 6 minutes later, the tank separates, big boom, big flash. And then it's like, you go from loaded and vibrating to just this liberated, arms floating if you let them relax, things. I mean, almost unbelievable that in 8.5 minutes you could leave that launch pad and be in orbit around our planet traveling at 17,500 miles an hour. Doesn't make sense.
That's the craziest thing. So it's about 8.5 minutes, you said?
Yeah.
8.5 minutes to get up there?
Yeah.
And what is it like to have 3 Gs on you? I mean, are you having trouble breathing with 3 Gs?
You know, it's really not bad, actually, because first of all, you're on your back, right? It's coming through your chest, which is much more tolerable than like when you're in a fighter or a trainer jet or in an airplane pulling a G's and it's coming like through your head that way. So you still, I mean, imagine 3 of you sitting on your chest, you know, you feel a little, you know, compressed, and you have to think about it a little bit, but it's not as bad as if you were doing that in an airplane and really having to, you know, kind of push all the blood to your head and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
And now, so what are you doing during those 8.5 minutes? Are you sitting back and just enjoying the ride, or are you guys constantly orchestrating what's going on while it's so chaotic?
Well, for about the first minute and a half, there's not a whole lot the crew can do, or could do during the launch. And so most of that would be monitoring all the information, being in communication with the launch control and the mission control centers. And, you know, it's kind of funny, the fact that you really couldn't do a whole lot in that first minute and a half. I don't know if it was purposeful from this standpoint, but I mean, your body, and you're a human being, you're going to respond to all of that energy and stuff, you know. So I remember this smile coming across my face that I just couldn't control, high-fiving my crewmate next to me, you know, little woohoo, you know, under my breath kind of thing, just to respond to it. But then for the bulk of it afterwards, you're really just paying attention to the system information. You're communicating with the ground. You continue to do that. And then there are actions that the crew has to take, you know, just in sequence as things are going on. And that's primarily the commander and the pilot that are doing all of that. But as a mission specialist, you know, the flight engineer there with them, you know, we're backing them up on everything, changing displays, getting them the information they need. And so it's kind of this orchestrated effort throughout that process as well. Yeah.
So now it's been 9 minutes later, 8.5 minutes later, yeah. It goes quiet, it's calm, and you're weightless for the first time, right? Yeah. What is that like?
Well, you're still strapped in, you know, they still got you all, you know, all strapped in. But like I said, if you just relax, I mean, your arms just float up into this, they have kind of this neutral position that they get, and you watch your pencil float up on the end of the, you know, the tether that it's on your clipboard. And if there's any kind of stuff that didn't get clean, there's this awe of just seeing things float, you know, and you can't wait to get out of your seat yourself, really. You just cannot wait to do that. But it's probably about an hour or so worth of tasks and stuff to do before that's possible. Yeah.
So what's the first thing you did upon reaching space?
Well, there's another high five that goes on, because especially for the first time you get there, you know, kind of congratulating each other on arriving safely. And, you know, and then I think the first thing I did when I was able to get unstrapped from my seat is, and I think everybody does this, is you want to get that sense of what it feels like to float, but then you want your face in a window. You want to be seeing what it looks like outside.
So what's that first glimpse like, seeing the Earth from space? I mean, we've all seen pictures, videos, but probably doesn't do any justice to what it's like to look at it from space.
Yeah, I think it's like all of our best vacations and kind of, experiences, adventures that we have where what we capture in our brain and our heart, and our mind and stuff is so much more stunning really than anything we can get with a picture or a video, or the words that we try to use to share it with. And that's the way it was with looking at Earth from space. I thought again that I had prepared myself for that. I knew it would be incredible, but it was just like overwhelmingly beautiful. And it was that way every time. Every time I looked out the window, there was
Can't get
some new
old. There's no way it gets
surprise. It
old.
was, yeah, you're not wanting to pull the shade down to watch the movie. I mean, you want to see what's out there.
Yeah. I mean, did that give you a whole new perspective on life? People have said that you just recognize how insignificant you are and how small you are, and what a beautiful planet we have. And these are all emotions that I've heard quoted, but is that something that you gained a new perspective on life and yourself, and when you saw that?
I think so. Yeah, I really feel like that. I think, and you use two words like insignificant and small, and I had heard those used before I went, right? And that was, mostly like listening to the Apollo astronauts. I mean, they saw the whole planet as this sphere, hanging in space, and several of them used the words insignificant. I remember being bothered by that, like, oh my gosh, please, I hope what they meant was they were in awe, they were humbled, by what they were experiencing. And because insignificant to me has kind of this negative connotation to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be that, it can't be that. So I was so happy when I got to space and I looked out the window and I'm like, this is awesome. This is awe and wonder in your face like nothing I had ever seen before. And I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it every time. It's like, wow, there is something so totally significant about this. You start thinking about, holy moly, first of all, we live on a planet. How often do you think, you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
We're all Earthlings, this whole thin blue line, only border that matters, but the interconnectivity of it all. But like things like, wow, if that planet was a little closer, a little further from the sun, not so good for us. So this whole
Mm-hmm.
significance and who and where we are and how we need to relate to each other and all the life we share the planet with and the planet itself. It just is this kind of package of awesomeness that you can't deny. And you want to share it with everyone. And you want to keep experiencing it, and you want to let people know that you don't have to go to space to understand that. That's the thing that I think is really important too.
Gotta be great if there was a way to experience that without going through all the work that you did to get there, because
I don't think you do. I don't think you have to go to space to have those feelings. Like certainly to look at Earth from space, you gotta, and that's opening up more and more over time. But I look out the window right now and I'm looking up at this blue sky. I'm up in St. Pete. I think you're down in Miami area. And it's like,
Correct.
We are just blessed with this view, off our planet. And if we start considering it that way, it's like, wow, my feet are in the grass on a planet.
Yeah.
It's rotating at 1,000 miles an hour and traveling around the sun at 67. I mean, that's pretty incredible to think about.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that if everyone got to experience what you just described, I feel like the world would be a lot better place. People would have a perspective about how lucky we are to be here. But going into spacewalks, which I find fascinating, you were lucky enough to do multiple spacewalks.
I did one. Only one.
Wow. Okay. Only one, but I'm sure it felt like more.
In my mind, I did more.
So tell us about what a spacewalk entails, the preparation, the dangers. Obviously, you're free floating, so obviously dangers involved, but just tell us about the spacewalk. Probably even gave you a more amazing experience because you're not looking through a window, but you're actually floating in the darkness.
Yeah, it's, I think all astronauts now train for spacewalking. And it's pretty intense, the training that we do on the ground. There's some virtual reality stuff we do that's about translating around the station and things and how you would work along with the robotic arm if it was part of the activity. But most of that training is done in those big suits, the big white suits that, you think about when you think about an astronaut. And on the ground, they weigh about 300 pounds. And so everything we do in those suits is you know, lifted and with a crane into the pool. They try to get you as neutrally buoyant as possible, you know, so when you're moving around. But that's 6.5 hours in this suit that has the drag of the water, the pressure, you know, that you're working against in the suit, and all your work is with your hands, really. You know, counteracting gravity that's wanting to rotate you back around when you're trying to get in a position. It really is the most, I think it's the most physically challenging thing I've ever done. And you have to do it unless you're hurting yourself in the suit. You really have to go through all that with this smile on your face, the pleasure is the pain kind of thing, because getting through it is the only way you're gonna know how to do it. And then thankfully, when you get to space, the suit doesn't weigh 300 pounds and you can move easily. And I'm not going to say it's easy to do a spacewalk, but it's much better the way it is, that there's this real difficulty in the training, and yet it eases up a little bit for, for when you're in space. But we do, for any one spacewalk that we do at least 6 or 7 dedicated runs in the swimming pool, which are each about 6.5 hours of going through all of that orchestration of the spacewalk itself. And then before that, you've done just the basic training, you know, a year or so of working in the pool in the suit just to know how to use it and do these different, you know, skill kind of things. But then once you get out of the hatch, you know, and you're doing it for real, I'm telling you, you know, awe and wonder are 2 words that come up again, but surreal.
I can only imagine. I mean, try to describe what is that like to just be floating in space?
It is, you know, because now you're in your own little personal spaceship, right? Everything you need to stay alive is incorporated in this spacesuit. I'm really fortunate, like through the projects we do with the kids, I had the chance to continue to work with ILC Dover, who are, they're the spacesuit company. They made the suits for walking on the moon. They make the suits for what we use on the space station. They're helping us make these suits. But I got to know them as I was training and stuff, and just to learn just the complexity of me having my own personal spaceship, you know, my own personal life support system to be able to crawl around on the outside of the station and be safe. Because it's all that's between you and this deadly vacuum of space, right? And you try not to dwell on that too much while you're out, you know, working in it. And the thing that makes you feel better is you've trained in it, just like we do with everything else, where all the things that we think we know can go wrong, we've practiced and, you know, tried to get comfortable with, so that the nominal stuff you're doing becomes a little bit easier. But man, I'll tell you, you know, you look at the visor on this suit back here and it seems like this big wide open thing, and yet it's kind of this little peering view. You know, so you have to turn your whole body to see left or right. You know, if you turn your head in the suit, you're just seeing the side of the suit. So you got to manipulate your body to see things. But it's like when you do, it's like the whole world opens up underneath you, and it is just incredible.
I can only imagine. You know, 2 words that people have used to describe space on spacewalks are quiet and black, and they say it's unlike any other quiet you've ever heard, and unlike any other black you've ever seen. I mean, try to describe those 2 phenomena when you're out there.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting because inside the suit, if nobody's talking to you, you know, in the headset, all you're hearing is like the hum, you know, like the quiet hum of the fan that's circulating the air in the suit. And, you know, you're not even really hearing your own breathing that much. It's not, you know, replaying for you. So it's really just kind of that quiet hum in the suit. You can get the temperature very comfortable, so it's cozy in there too. And you're right, that blackness is like the clearest, darkest, deepest, like depth to it black that I've ever seen. And then again, you put your head down and there's that earth, or up, depending on where you are on the station. And there's that earth just glowing, translucent, iridescent, all the colors that you know Earth to be there, you know, 300 miles below you. And it's incredible. And the experience on my spacewalk that really stands out for me is I had the opportunity to ride on the end of the robotic arm. So I picked this box up off the end of the space station, which on the ground, this is always cool to me, would have weighed about 800 pounds. But up there, I'm hanging on to it. I could have done anything I wanted with it. I'm holding on to it. I'm strapped in to the end of the arm. And then my crewmate, Kevin Ford, flew me from the end of the space station on that arm on this big arc for like 25 minutes. It took me to get from the end of the station down into the cargo bay of the space shuttle. And that, I totally in training, because of the way training was, thought I'd be like feeling like I was moving and, you know, kind of thinking about having to think about holding on to the box. And it was the most peaceful, still thing I think I've ever experienced in my life. I felt like I was just standing there, hanging effortlessly onto this box. And it was like the space station moved out of my view, you know, space and Earth kind of were rotating in my view. And then out of nowhere comes this cargo bay of the space shuttle. And I'm like, how did I not feel that happening? It was really like I was just standing. And I kind of credit my crewmate, Kevin, of being just such an excellent flyer that I didn't feel any of it. But I think it's just the way it feels.
Wow. Just exceptional. What was your scariest moment in all of your space flights and spacewalk? And was there a defining moment where you had the most fear?
You know, again, I don't ever remember feeling fear, being afraid myself in that environment with what was going on. We certainly, I mean, don't get me wrong, you go out on a spacewalk and you are probably the most deliberate, diligent, you know, human being that you've ever been. Your tether is on, you're making sure your systems are good, you're making sure your buddy's okay, you're taking care of each other, the community, all of that. You realize that that's the kind of way you have to operate when you're in that environment. And, you know, inside the station on day-to-day basis too. And we certainly had, you know, emergency alarms going off in the middle of the night. But what I remember of that was not fear, but just this almost like energy of, wow, look at how we're working as a crew. You know, we're all coming out of our sleep stations at 3 o'clock in the morning. We're floating to, you know, our console where we all need to be. We're doing this the way we trained to do it together. And it's just this reassuring, like almost prideful kind of thing that, wow, we can do this together, you know, very effectively. But then I'll tell you, I mean, nothing happened, but my underlying fear always was that something was going to happen to my family down on the ground and I wouldn't be able to be there. That happens to me on a business trip, you know, it's not anything.
How ironic that you're up in space in harm's way and you're scared about your family down on Earth. It's kind of ironic.
Well, I mean, my son was 7 when I flew the first time and 9 when I flew the second time. And, you know, so you're thinking, you know, there's this whole balance of, okay, why am I doing this even? You know, for me, it wasn't like, ooh, this is just this big adventure. It's because I really believe that what we do in space is important and will be of value to him later in his life. And it's all about improving life on Earth, all those kinds of things that, you know, go beyond the adventure of just riding in a spaceship or doing a spacewalk. It's that there's value to it, you know, that's kind of a greater good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be weightless. When we talk about eating, the food obviously is totally different. You can't cook, sleeping. What is the first kind of night and the first meal like in space?
Awesome. Just like everything else. It's, you know, it's hard to describe the floating. I always like to describe it like flying too. I mean, your whole way of moving becomes this 3-dimensional thing that it's just not the norm here on Earth. We're very 2D. We're walking in straight lines. We're going up or down. You know, in space, you're gently pushing off a surface that's causing you then to rotate, and you can figure out how to move your body so that you roll and flip and move forward to get to that place, that other place in the station, you know, eventually very gracefully to do that. And it's a really liberating feeling. And I remember before going space, watching that and thinking, oh my gosh, how's that going to feel? And now it's like, I watch it and I think, I know how, I know how that feels. It's like I'm watching something that's normal now. Certainly when you first get there, you know, your body's affected a little bit when you get to space. All the fluids kind of shift up towards your head. You'll notice astronauts look a little, their faces look a little puffy, some more than others when they get to space. And I had kind of a moderate amount of that. But for some, it's really kind of a congested feeling too, pressure on the back of your sinuses. So that can be a little uncomfortable for a while. A lot of people feel nauseous. You know, the little hairs in your ears aren't doing their normal thing anymore to help you with balance and which way is up, because there is no up or down, and getting over that. But most people get over that very quickly. And then you get to space and you don't have that load of gravity on you anymore, right? And your spine elongates, so your body stretches out, and almost immediately, I mean, it's like I grew an inch and a half. And that stretching of your spine, it's like a lower back pain that now you can't stretch out to relieve, right? So the first day or so felt like you were always trying to like get rid of that lower back pain. So sleeping was a little difficult the first day or two, but then after that went away, and it was the best sleep I've ever had in my life. Absolutely. Wow. I would float into my sleeping bag, get in my position, do my little Sudoku puzzle, stick it up on the wall, turn the light out, and I would not wake up until the alarm went off. I was floating in that same position when I woke up, and you know, either the alarm, some emergency going on, or mine that I'd set for the morning. And it was just the most restful, peaceful sleep to me that I've ever had.
Wow. Again, it's so hard to describe it. I'm sure the actual feeling is way, way more, you know, intense. What is it like when you come back to Earth and kind of reacclimating after you've been up in space for several days to gravity and all that? Is it rough to reacclimate, or is it pretty straightforward?
It's different for everyone. It's the same, you know. I think there's some dependency on how long you've been there. You know, my first flight, I was up there for a little over 3 months on the first mission. And I was kind of worried about coming back. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to feel when I get back? I've seen people that have come back after a few days and they're having to get carried off the shuttle. And then I've seen people who've come back after 6 months and they're walking off the Soyuz. And so it's different for everyone. And so you don't really know what to expect the first time. And that's true getting to space. You know, how's microgravity going to affect me? Which I fared very well. I felt really good when I got to space. And I would have to say I felt pretty good coming home. The common thing is that everyone feels really, really heavy. I mean, this whole gravity thing is intense. Yeah, it's why it's true. You know, just get off the couch and walk around a little bit. Our bodies are working off a real load on ourselves. You know, it's exercise to do just that. And you know, you get back and you're like, man, I have to think about holding my head up. Our heads are heavy. You know, you don't have to think about that when you're in space. And just posture and moving your leg. I mean, I remember feeling my trainer on the first day wanted me to hop over these little I called them Barbie doll cones. I mean, if they were 4 inches tall, that was high. And I remember standing there laughing with him for like 5 minutes, like, there's no way I'm going to be able to jump over this little cone. And he's, you know, back and forth. Yes, you will. No, I won't. Yes, you will. And then I did it, and how quickly our brains recalibrate to, you know, the load we're under now, to the little hairs getting recalibrated. All of those kinds of things are just so cool to me about how our bodies and our brains adapt to different environments. And yeah, I was thankful not to really feel sick either way, but you feel really heavy.
Yeah, sounds like it. I want to wrap up just by talking about your hobby that you've picked up since retirement, and you've obviously taken it very seriously. Tell us a little bit about your art and your foundation. It sounds wonderful.
Okay. Well, I always just growing up and all through life kind of was artsy craftsy, I guess, you know, like woodworking and painting and, you know, creating things. And when I was in space, I painted with watercolors while I was in space. And when I was thinking about retiring from NASA, I'm like, how do I uniquely, kind of interestingly share this spaceflight experience I've had, you know, both from the standpoint that everyone on the planet should know about the International Space Station and you know, not just the masterpiece of the station, but these relationships that we've developed with 15 other countries peacefully, successfully for over 20 years, working, you know, orbiting the planet with the intent to be all about improving life on Earth. And then just this appreciation, like we talked about very early on, of oh my gosh, I live on a planet. I'm an Earthling. This interconnectivity of it all, and I felt like my art could be a way to do that and to share the backstory. Even if somebody didn't like my artwork. And then that evolved into working with an artist that had started the art and medicine program at MD Anderson, the Pediatric Cancer Center in Houston. Ian Sion, he had always done these projects with the kids where he would take their individual artwork and create some community, like bigger masterpiece out of it. And he wanted to do something with space. And long story short, I got tied in with him. We started doing these art spacesuits, and what started in one hospital with kids in one place has evolved now. This suit was created with artwork from kids in hospitals and refugee centers in over 50 countries around the world. Three of our spacesuits had already flown to space and come back. And one on the launch today, on the Soyuz crewed launch today that went to the space station, they were carrying with them a suit called Dreamer that was created with this Russian and US partnership that we have. And we're calling it one of the crew members on that mission. So that suit will be in space for a little while. And we are now working on a suit called Beyond, where we are hopeful to get at least a piece of art from at least one child in every country on the planet. And then the suit, and ILC Dover, our spacesuit company, again, has very kindly volunteered to quilt that artwork together into one of these spacesuits. And we always cross our fingers. We never can promise, but we're hopeful that one day that suit might be able to travel to space as well. And at a minimum, it's going to go in November to Glasgow for the UN Climate Change Conference for COP26 to be kind of an ambassador for Spaceship Earth. And yeah, very exciting. You mentioned our motto at the beginning, which is uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. And I think that's really the simplest way to say it, is that just there is this inspiration that comes through space, even for kids that are, going through what you hope is the worst thing they ever have to experience in their lives. And it allows them to, through the art and the idea of space exploration to transcend that experience they're having, to think about their future, to consider something beyond that. And as soon as I got involved with it with Ian early on, I knew that this was my next mission in life. And I really feel like, okay, Nicole, you got to go to space and you like art so that you could now, bring this all together with these really wonderful people through the Space for Art Foundation.
I mean, what a great way to translate your skills and your career. And then as you retire, make an impact afterwards here on Earth. Just such an inspiration. And like everyone's been saying here, Nicole, you're obviously a legend. I'm gonna have to cut off the interview, even though I could talk to you forever. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for
absolutely
trying to describe something that I'm sure words cannot really do justice. It's incredible what you've done. Thank you for all your work up in space. Thank you for all you're doing now for the kids. And again, thank you for your time. This interview means a lot to me.
Well, thank you so much for including me. And I encourage people, while we might not be able to explain it, the pictures and videos have gotten so much better. Follow along with the work on the space station, experience some of it, even like I do vicariously now through what's going on. There's so much to know about what's happening there, off the Earth, for the Earth. And I'm really thankful for your interest as well, and for sharing it with people this way.
Of course, if you guys ever need a brain surgeon to go to space, I'll sign up. All right,
I'll take
me on
you.
that list. Sounds great, okay. Nicole. Thank you so much. Okay, have a great weekend.
See ya. You too. Bye.